Welcome to the TheXTPodcast, your ultimate destination for valuable insights, practical advice, and inspiring stories that will transform the way you experience business, governance, and life. Join your host, Ashutosh, as he dives deep into three distinct editions: Customer Experience Edition, where industry leaders discuss CX strategies, product brand, employee experience, digital innovations, and best practices for improving customer engagement, retention, and loyalty.
Are CX leaders still viewing CX as a mere support function rather than a strategic driver of business success? How can we shift from reactive customer service to proactive customer experience? And what are the hidden costs of not aligning every function in your organization with your brand's promise? In today's episode of the XT podcast, we tackle these crucial questions and more. I'm thrilled to welcome Lynn Hunsaker, a true pioneer in the field of CX. Lynn has led company-wide engagements in CX for global firms, served as an international board member of the CXPA, Customer Experience Professionals Association, and taught CX at top institutions like UC Berkeley. She has been an award-winning president of the Silicon Valley American Marketing Association and a two-term president of the San Francisco Bay Area Association for Psychological Type. Lynn was also the first in the world to conduct a global study of B2B CX practices. She specializes in B2B, silos, customer-centric business and marketing, engaging C-suite and non-customer facing groups in CX, driving ROI, and a lot more. Lynn's insights are invaluable for any organization aiming to excel in CX. In this fifth episode of the XT podcast, Lynn helps me explore how CX should be defined, the importance of aligning brand promises with actual delivery, and the power of using customer insights across all functions of an organization. Lynn also shares a unique 4 C's of CX engagement: curiosity, costs, continuity, and catalyst, and how these can revolutionize the way businesses think about and implement CX strategies. Join us for an insightful conversation that will not only challenge your current views on CX, but also provide actionable steps to make your organization truly customer-centric. So let's get in. Welcome to the XT podcast, Lynn. Thank you so much for joining.
Well, it's a really great opportunity to talk with you today. Thanks so much.
The pleasure is all mine, and I'm really excited for the listeners and the viewers, especially now that we are going to go through the 4 C's in depth. I've already introduced the theme in the introduction, so really looking forward to that. But at the outset, Lynn, I was very keen to talk about my pet peeve, which is that the leaders as well as the brands in general, they seem to be thinking of CX even now as more of a support function, where in fact leaders like you pretty much proven that this is a far more deeper cross-functional strategic mindset. What do you think is the reason for this perception gap? Where is it that we are lacking as CX leaders in general, and what is it that we could do to make this perspective shift happen?
Well, a lot of people think of what a customer experience is in a moment, or more specifically, in many cases, a department in a company, which is actually support. Both of these definitions are wrong. A couple of really big reasons for it are that customer experience technology is sold into contact centers primarily, and yet It's not really customer experience technology, it's customer support technology, right? And so you have marketing groups that are creating an experience with every single engagement offer. Well, that's not the customer experience, right? We need to step back and think about ourselves as customers. I buy everything that's in this room, and I have an experience with it long after I bought it. Sometimes I have interactions with the seller or the maker, but usually those were very small aspect of what my experience is. So the experience for a customer is a mindset. It's not something that you're manipulating the customer to do or something that you're rescuing the customer. Those are parts of what goes into it. It needs to be a mindset across the entire senior leadership team and across every single employee and partner in the company, including the suppliers. How do we synchronize with what the customer is expecting? Because when you synchronize, you're minimizing waste to costs and you're maximizing value to everyone. Better employee experience, better employee engagement and productivity, better partner experience, better customer experience, and better investor experience.
Cannot agree more, Lynn. Very well put. And I really love the way you underline the fact that the CX tech that is being used today can actually be rightly phrased as a CS tech, a customer support tech, or a customer services tech. Because what I've seen that it does is it makes the entire engagement and approach reactive to the problems that are being heard or being solicited, rather than being a lot more proactive and focused on what is needed by the customer in the first place, what the customers expect. We would love to take one step back and ask you about the way the CX is defined as well. Len, right now, when we talk about whether the CX was good or bad, it's always in terms of CSAT, NPS, customer effort score, and so on. It doesn't tell us why is there a problem and therefore how to fix it. At best, it tells us whether there is a problem or not. Is there a fundamental definition challenge as well? How do we bring in the mindset to the definition of CX itself? How do you centrally place mindset into the whole equation?
Well, all of those metrics that are being used for customer experience are lagging indicators. Why do I call them
Right.
lagging indicators? You cannot measure them until the customer experienced whatever you gave them.
Right.
So you're measuring it after the experience. Even if you're asking the customer, how likely are you to do this or to do that? What's your preference for this and that? Well, they're basing it on what they already experienced. So the way you
Correct.
get ahead of all of that and start focusing on leading indicators is you need to peel the onion back. So you do a correlation analysis, which is a statistical solution for identifying the key drivers behind one of those indexes. We call Net Promoter Score, CSAT, Effort Score, those types of things are an index. You can use them standalone or you can make a combination score, kind of like a customer health score is a combination of several factors. You need to just figure out what works for the behaviors of your industry and your customers. Don't just follow blindly what everyone is doing, because I can bet you that almost everyone is doing it not really ideally from the customer perspective. So the thing is, you need to do the correlation analysis, which tells you the key drivers. We did this for every single one of our business units. So every single general manager knew what their key drivers were, as well as the company's overall key drivers. And we discussed that with each one of the general managers face to face. So I went to all the sites in Europe and Asia and Americas, wherever we had business going on. And we discussed that for a couple of hours and then immediately did a workshop. We were looking at the Pareto analysis of the sub-factors behind a key driver. So say, for example, the key driver was responsiveness. Well, you want to find out what aspect of responsiveness needs to be solved. And there could be several aspects. Responsiveness where? Responsiveness when? Responsiveness how? And so how do you find that out? You need to consult your CRM, your ERP, social media, surveys, whatever you have. But we found that customer comments suffice very well. And in these workshops, we had a representative from different parts of the organization. So we'd have cross-functional viewpoints in the conversations. So it might have been an account team, but then we would have somebody from supplier management, somebody from HR, someone from finance, someone from quality or IT or whatever, and 5 or 6 people sitting around the table reading through the customer comments for responsiveness. Well, they put the sticky notes on the wall for why are we allowing the customer to be upset about responsiveness or to feel like there's a gap. Right. And the next row of sticky notes is why are we allowing that? And then why are we allowing that? So you have 5 rows of sticky notes, and at the end, that's what we spent the whole afternoon creating an action plan. Then you want to track the progress of your action plan eradicating the 5th why. That is a leading indicator. We use these leading indicators for all the different groups, which is more than 50 across our company at that time. Each group was working on 2 key drivers in the workshop. So we actually had over 100 leading indicators going on at the same time. Some business units were also working on responsiveness, or some were working on equipment uptime or other aspects of what the customer cared about. But we had over 100 action plans happening at the same time every year. Each one of them was measuring very earnestly their progress for eradicating that 5th why, not asking the customer, something that they could measure internally about, are we still seeing this 5th why happen? And if not, what can we do to make sure that we're getting rid of it almost forever? So this was the source of our bonus pay for directors and above, everyone was based on how well are they finalizing these action plans. So they reported that every quarter. At the end of the year, my general manager and I met with each general manager, so over 50 video conferences, reviewing their progress, so about 15 minutes for each meeting. And we could give them a 0.5 multiplier or up to a 1.5 multiplier for their bonus. Don't underestimate how really earnest everybody was to maximize. Everyone wanted the 1.5 multiplier. So say, for example, their bonus was $20,000. They could have gotten 30,000 if they really went above and beyond. Almost everyone tried to. And we did see that the survey scores followed suit. The customer behaviors followed the same thing. The general managers who were not that stalwart about the whole thing, they didn't have as good progress in their business, customer behaviors and the financials that followed. So this was a true leading indicator of future scores, future behaviors of the customer, and future money. But it wasn't that far in the future. We were seeing the savings and the trust and the buying pretty immediately.
Lynn, this is why I love podcasting and talking to leaders like you. In the last probably 1.5, 2 minutes, this was a treasure trove because you talked about the strategy, you talked about the roadmap, you talked about all the frameworks and approaches, whether it is 5 Eyes or Pareto's or key factor analysis or correlations and regressions. Most importantly, ensuring that the people are incentivized on objective measures. Each of them have very clear objective measures, and there's an incentive driving success or performance around it. So this is pretty much a best practice guide in 2.5 minutes or 2 minutes. Now, one key aspect that you talked about, though, in this entire roadmap, Lynn, was about you having to talk to cross-functional leaders across the geography multiple times through the year and engaging with them, getting inputs from them and having them act on the insights that you would share with them. This is a huge challenge for anyone and everyone because clearly the functional leaders have their own specific KRAs and KPIs. And unless we handle the CX aspect the way you just mentioned, and there is a clear a positive transformation possible for the functional leaders, there won't be enough buy-in. So I would love to take some inputs and advice from you, Lynn, on how to get that cross-functional leadership buy-in in the first place, because that I feel is a major constraint in achieving success on any CX initiative or program in any organization.
Yeah, and so first of all, you need to generate curiosity among people. Because when they're curious, then they'll be thinking about what's next, what's happening now. And we saw that in the early part of the pandemic, when every single department was wondering how they can survive as a company, keep their jobs. They were very interested in what's going on with customers and what they need to modify. Unfortunately, that was a very difficult circumstance for everyone. But still, that hunger, that thirst for what's happening with customers is healthy. And we should be generating that as customer experience people, because if you're not, then guess what? Things are actually changing with customers and you're not even paying attention. There's all kinds of things being done by your competitors. There's all kinds of forces going on with technologies and regulations and international forces, social forces, a tremendous number of things happening that can change stuff and you're not keeping up. There's no such thing as like a safe zone in customer experience. People tend to think when they show their data that it's all, pretty steady, then that's a safe zone. That's ridiculous. There's really no such thing as that. And you're really shooting yourself in the foot because you're not keeping up. You don't have a hunger. What I do, I try to focus people on the costs. What's going wrong? Because when you have a lot of things coming into support or a lot of complaints on social media, that's hurting your bottom line. Okay, the costs coming into support, you could have that money, if you didn't have those problems, going into more hiring, more salary increases, right? You could have it going into just more budget to do more interesting work, get that extra interesting stuff done, as well, more profit sharing for investors and employees who are shareholders. So that's where I try to focus people's attention is on the costs. And there's a phrase that I've coined called CX annuities, which means that you need to look at costs today as something that is still going to be happening next year and the year after and 5 years from now and 10 years from now if nobody's getting to the heart of it. If you're only trying to buy new technology to solve this and you're still adding costs, if you're even creating as a self-service, you might still be creating costs because customers are frustrated. Then what do? They go on social media or wherever and spread the negative word of mouth. The more negative word of mouth you have, you're creating more costs for marketing and sales to have a harder time getting sales velocity, which is getting money in the bank quicker. The sales cycle is delayed because customers want more proof points because of all the doubts they heard. So be thinking about that. Everything we do that bothers customers costs you. And it doesn't just cost you a dime here and a dollar there. It's actually a mushrooming snowball of costs. All the remedies, returns, the refunds, the escalations, and the churn, and the negative word of mouth. It just, never ends. So what we need to be doing is thinking about getting to the root of it, stopping it, and then you have what's called an annuity. Because all of the money that you had to spend on that yesterday, last year, you don't have to spend this year or next year or the next year or the next year.
Right.
So you're actually saving that money exponentially, right? You can claim that you're saving that exponentially. I did an example with this in a blog not too long ago, where I was just taking a very small example for a small manufacturer that this issue was a chronic issue, but it was only taking 20 hours of customer support time. It was taking 4 hours of finance and IT time to address the remedies and things like that, the returns and so on. So 24 hours a week. And then to solve it, you would need 30 hours between some IT people and customer experience people over the course of 9 months. So at first glance, everyone would look at that circumstance, this whole scenario is like, yeah, that's not a priority. That's just noise. But in fact, these issues that customers were calling about were also involving some returns and some refunds. It was a $2,000 product, so it wasn't like, crazy expensive. Also wasn't a lot of returns, but in a year, it added up to $1.7 million. Now, the cost to solve the problem would take 9 months, but it was only about $55,000. So in comparison, the 1.7 million and 55,000, that gets your attention.
Of course.
But when you also do the ROI, you're actually getting 9,700% ROI on that one small thing. So as an example, it's very effective to show people, gee whiz, wouldn't you like to get 1.7 million back?
Right.
So many hundreds of million back, right? Because when you look at the actual chronic issues, they're probably much bigger than that. So now you're talking about really big money. Now you can take that money savings of 1.7 million, and you can spread it across 25% for higher salaries, 25% for higher budget, 25% for more hiring, and 25% for more profit sharing, or however you want to divvy up the money. And now you're starting to get people a real personal buy-in to it, right? So I actually usually express this a lot easier, just asking people, what is a top issue that our customers need help from us for? And so whatever they answer doesn't even have to be accurate. Say, how much do you think that's costing us? Yeah, well, I suppose, such and such. Yeah, that's probably the tip of the iceberg when you consider all this, spiraling snowball, right? But would you like to see that cut in half? Would you like to have that forever cut in half, or even possibly 80% less? Maybe it could go away almost completely. And that's how I get people's attention when I start telling them, what would you do with that savings? How would you spend it for salaries and hiring and budget and profit sharing?
Absolutely. What I've often seen is when it comes to customer insights, I see that there are only 4 P's that come out. One is problems, and then the other 3 are priorities, preferences, and possibilities. And because the mindset is for the CX to be actually a support or a services function, the focus is always on asking what the problems are or figuring out what the problems are and trying to resolve those, and it makes it very reactive, a challenge. But the moment we focus on curiosity as a lever, we are unearthing far more things beyond problems, and that could help the functional leaders be far more proactive as well. So beyond the cost as a efficiency outcome, there's a far more strategic potential that it unearths beyond the tactical problem solving approach. So I really love the way you coined that curiosity as the first C in your 4 C's of CX engagement, Lynn.
Yeah.
Having said that, a lot of the times I've seen that this becomes a unilateral exercise. It's a one-stop intervention. What could we do to make it a continued engagement, Lynn? What is it that would help us drive this on a continued basis?
Yeah. So you're collecting customer insights even if you don't have any tech to collect it. The fact that customers are talking to you, that they're buying something, you have a conversation one way or another, you are collecting customer insights. So we have customer insights galore. And the usage rate of our customer insights is extremely low, probably 1%. There's probably 99% customer insights that nobody's even using. And that's a real waste. Now, what do we mean by that? Well, how many of your growth efforts are using customer insights as the basis? Did you do a deep dive before you are creating that new product introduction or a product upgrade or a change process, entering a new market, expanding with a certain customer segment, creating an alliance, a merger, any kind of partnership whatsoever, a new supplier? Are we consulting customer insights to guide us? What are the top priorities that customers have that we need to keep in mind for the development of this? Are we even checking in with customers as we go? Even creating a marketing plan for something, are we checking in with customers to test our assumptions? Okay, this is not a new concept. We've been talking about this really strongly the past 20 years, agile design.
Right.
Agile is something that customer experience people believe in. Human-centered design is exactly what I'm talking about. But yet we're only using it for the design of a website or the design of some kind of touch point that a customer has. That's ridiculous. We need to be using these insights far and wide, everywhere. And as we do that, we're actually enrolling the entire company to exponentially grow customer experience value. Why should it be limited to just your little team? You see, the whole company exists to serve what customers are buying. When customers stop buying, the jobs aren't there anymore. So this really isn't rocket science. It's quite common sense. The senior leadership team should be using customer insights as they're creating their strategy. Now, what's the problem there? We're not collecting customer insights very usefully. We're collecting it about, was Sam a good agent on the call? Who the heck cares? Sam knows whether he did a good job or he or she did a good job on that call just by listening to the customer's voice tone, the words. You don't have to be very smart to know whether it was a good call. So these surveys that are asking this type of thing, just do your doggone job as an employee or an associate, and do your job as a supervisor. Don't be burdening the customer with these types of feedback. Instead, focus on collecting feedback that's actually interesting for customers to participate in. Focus on asking questions that you don't know, that you can't know. And I call it almost free VOC. So you have like all this data coming in. You're recording the calls, you have email transcripts and this and that. Gee whiz, you can go through it manually like we did back in the 90s. We didn't have technology that was like artificial intelligence. We didn't have these types of things today where you can do a word cloud. We did those manually, and yet we did it.
Sure.
I did it. I hired temporaries and so on to, get more than 50 reports out within a few weeks from the survey. Even our survey provider couldn't give a fast enough turnaround. Be creative. Now we have artificial intelligence. So you can take this customer insight and say, what does our senior leadership team need to know about? What would be some things that they need to consider for the CapEx policy or OpEx policies for this year? Right? What would an engineer need to know? What does the accounting team need to know? And if your artificial intelligence doesn't figure that out right away, then put together a small group of people or ask me to help you, for heaven's sake. But you can get that type of information that's useful for every group. So you don't really want to show your software, your VOC software dashboard to every group. That's information overload. What you want to show them is what's useful for them to act on, what helps them to be more creative in creating more value what do they need to stop doing because they're either out of habit or, nobody cares, apathy, or just not knowing, throwing stuff over the fence to the touch points. And you're spending a tremendous amount of money trying to manage those touch points and then just throwing good money after bad. So, that's where we really have a huge waste in customer experience. We're not using customer insights. You shouldn't do any cost reductions without you looking at customer insights first, because most likely you're making decisions that are going to hurt you. You're going to be reducing trust among employees, reducing trust among customers, and all of those things that you do that reduces value is going to reduce your investors' value. So it's just silly that we're managing this way.
Can't agree more, Lynn. And simply put, if the customer experience function was allowed to uncover insights, as you rightly said, and propagate them across the functions when they need it, so that they could effectively act on those and be more successful at driving the functions the right way, that would be the perfect, deliverable for a CX function, right? Where do you see the challenge, Lynn? What would you recommend to address this rightly, the structure for a CX function? Where should the reporting be? Do you have any recommendations on the structure and the reporting within the CX or within the larger organization? Where should CX fit in to ensure that this works this way, the way you articulated it?
So ideally, the chief customer officer or VP of customer experience, or whatever you want to call it, you can call it the brand integrity leader of the company, they should be reporting to the CEO, because the CEO ultimately is responsible to the board and investors, right? And as such, if you're reporting like that, you should be positioned as an ally to all of the other people reporting into the CEO. Okay, next best placement is possibly reporting into the COO, Chief Operating Officer, because the Chief Operating Officer is supposed to make the company run like a well-oiled machine, and yet they're not, because we have these gaps. If they were running like a well-oiled machine, we wouldn't need so much support, right? We wouldn't have as much churn and negative word of mouth and all these costs. So the chief operating officer is doing the best they can just to try to get day-to-day stuff and some strategic things, but nobody is managing these gaps. The gap is, what did you promise the customer so that they decided to buy from you? They decided to engage with you. If you're a government or a nonprofit, they decided they were going to spend time or effort or energy or whatever with your brand, with your organization. So they've bought in. Now, did they get what they were expecting to get? Did they get your value proposition? If there's any confusion, any frustration, any complaints, something broke, something didn't work out, that's a problem. That's not having integrity as a brand, right? And so that's where customer experience teams need to focus, is how do we make sure we're promising exactly what we can deliver and that customers are getting exactly what we promised. And so you're shifting people to a proactive mindset that, first of all, your biz dev needs to know what's realistic. Don't just be, blindly choosing a vertical that you think is attractive and then pushing that onto the whole organization to deliver to. Make the marketing and sales accountable for retention, because unless they're accountable for retention, they're continually trying to sell to any warm dollar out there. And that's creating a lot of havoc for your operations. So if you don't report to the CEO or the C because of these reasons, then I would recommend reporting to wherever the power is in your company. So some companies, they have the power in the CRO or CFO, and some it's the CTO or the engineering groups or the marketing group in, say, consumer goods. Report where the power is, because that will be the place that gets the movement and the momentum going. But ideally, I would say, position it with the CEO as being an ally to every group, showing people how you can be more successful in creating more value in the company, creating more value in your functional area, helping us win, helping us avoid austerity and inflation and all that stuff that we don't like.
This is the single most important recommendation, Lynn, I genuinely feel, because structurally, if it is worked out the right way, everything else falls into place. Add on to that, I love the way you articulated the operational definition of CX. What I heard, and I was keen to confirm that, is the centrality of brand promise to the right customer experience. That as a brand, if you articulate the right promise, communicate the right promise, ensure that it's perceived the right way, and then through your operations and delivery, ensure that it's delivered on the ground across the touch points through the journey. You would have done your job. Your customer experience would have been delivered, right? So that promise as a central theme, and then every other function aligning to that promise to ensure that it's understood, communicated, and delivered. That's as simply as that. That could be the operational definition of CX, right? Anything and everything that can be done through insights and inputs that could enable this. That's when the well-oiled machinery would kick into action, isn't it?
Yes,
Perfect.
absolutely.
Perfect. So, Lynn, amidst all of this, you have pointed out the fourth C, which is the catalyst. And this is where you bring in the importance of the leaders driving the CX agenda. And when you say that, you always highlight CX is not a program, CX is not an approach, CX not as a initiative, but rather CX being a mindset. And you always emphasize that. So how do we engage, enable, and ensure that the leaders do act as catalysts to drive CX as a mindset change that truly it is and it should be?
Yeah. So, your customer experience team that we're talking about needs to not be bogged down with doing and generating revenue and things like that. So be thinking about your marketing and sales people as competent groups. They should be
Right.
doing the retention and the referrals and all of that stuff. Those things that people are now measuring as like a customer experience thing. That's marketing and sales. So the customer experience team needs to have more skills internally for how do we use the customer insights everywhere, right? So when you're helping every group use customer insights to align, to synchronize with where's the customer going, what are the customers aiming for, how do we differentiate ourselves, rise above industry norms to be better at helping customers reach their objectives? Well, that's the whole idea of this customer success thing, but it's kind of afterthought deal of, the product wasn't actually mature in its creation. It really didn't follow human-centered design. And that's why you need a huge customer success group. And so people think that's customer-centric. It's not. So Catalyst is working through all the 4 C's we talked about. Generating curiosity about the customer, and curiosity about the people in the company who are your internal customers. So you can't be a catalyst unless you are also really familiar with all of your internal customers. Your internal customers in the company is every single general manager with no exception, even audit, even procurement. So every single one of them can do a better job when they are using customer insights. And you need to champion the collection of customer insights in ways that can guide them. You need to also clarify customer insights in ways that are inspiring, because data will inform, but intelligence or patterns in the data will inspire. So that's how you're being a catalyst through the first C of curiosity. When you are curious about your internal stakeholders, they'll be curious about you, and they'll be thinking every time they see you coming down the hall or your email, oh, I wonder what Ashutosh can tell us today about something new that's happening with our customers, some new thing that we could leverage that's going to put us much higher than our competitors. So everyone likes that because it's job security. Focusing on the costs, it's those things that we talked about before, but more, because even in that little scenario I told you about, you're being a catalyst with the cost element when you're thinking about freeing up all these resources internally.
Right.
So those resources that had to do the remedies and the refunds and the escalations and the negative word of mouth and blah, 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 all those resources are freed up to have better bandwidth. They can be more productive in their job. They can be more proactive. They might be reassigned to certain new business endeavors. We're actually creating a new value stream instead of being tied up with all this rescuing. Right. And then you're freeing up customers, which is also exponential, because when you free up customers, they can be more productive in their life or business. See, there was a presentation by Verizon, which is a telecom here, very big telecom. So Verizon did a presentation at the CXPA conference. It was just one vice president of one region in the US. They noticed that customers were calling in about certain issues that they could probably handle on their own if there was only a portal that provided that data for customers to see. Then they wouldn't need to call in. So they measured the time in the queue and all the, stuff that was happening before they flipped the switch. And once they had this self-help with availability, measured it the next month. Well, the difference between before the switch was flipped and after was millions of hours saved for customers in the queue and on calls. Millions of hours were not being spent by customers with Verizon anymore about those issues. So think about
That's
your
huge.
business customers being more productive in their business. Think about your consumers being more productive in their life, being able to do those extra things with their kids or take that walk and, have a healthier body or whatever. We're really sapping away gross domestic product from our economies with all of this support cues and time where people could be happier, less stressed, and more productive. Now, when your customers are freed up like this and they're doing more in their life or their business, first of all, they may buy more from you because they're not tied up. They're creating more. Second, they're not having these frustrations. And so whenever they do talk to a friend about what's the best telecom or who do you use, then their conversation is going to be more positive, maybe more enthusiastic because they don't have a chip on their shoulder. There's no inhibitions. So being a catalyst is thinking about the bigger picture of the curiosity, the costs, and the continuity. Continuity isn't just over time. Continuity is also being connected to everything because everything is connected. Would they say no man is an island? So this siloized thinking has only become stronger since the pandemic because people are afraid, right? People are afraid about losing their job. People are afraid about what's happening with the economy, what's happening with the return to work and blah, blah, blah. So fear makes people myopic. Myopic means you're only seeing a tunnel vision. And therefore you're not thinking holistically. You're not really being a catalyst in your own work or, for the company. So being connected means that you're using customer insights to help people run the business from a customer experience context. Now, I did this as a VOC manager. I wasn't even head of something or other initially. I was later, but I was a VOC manager when I went for the first year, going to all the Asia and Europe locations and doing these workshops. When I came back, I spent my time visiting the people over in marketing, people who are doing biz dev, the people who are doing internal communications, people who are doing marketing, modeling, and forecasts. I visited people in HR, such as recruiting, onboarding, development, performance reviews, recognition, compensation. I went to talk to people over in finance and strategic planning and so forth. What was I talking to them about? I was telling them, here are the things that our customers have been saying. Here's some things that the groups over in Asia are doing. Here's some things that people over in the product teams are doing. They were really interested in this. It was just an interesting story. And we talked about how some of the things they were doing could actually help catalyze the whole company being more customer-centric, being more successful in these action plans if they only had that customer experience context in the way that they were doing the internal communications. If they were using customer experience context in the way they were hiring and onboarding and rewarding and every single thing. When you think about a requisition form and getting an approval on a requisition for budget, for spending, for hiring, or whatever, if one of the criteria is, how have you made a change for customers, internal or external, in the past quarter? What have you done in the past year that has improved the life of your internal or external customers? Well, that has huge power. Make people think about this all the time. How am I helping my fellow employees, who are also my internal customers, to have a better situation tomorrow than today? This is the idea of being a catalyst. You're creating more with less energy. That's a catalyst.
Nice.
You're creating a better output with less energy. And that's what I'm talking about. Thinking about the entire picture. We call the whole enchilada here. In the Southwest US, we call it the whole enchilada. Don't just be looking at one ingredient at a time, but it's the combination that makes it delicious.
Fantastic. It was a masterclass, Lynn. You have tied in all the 4 C's into one strategic insight on how to effectively drive the CX function. I really would want the CX professionals, Lynn, to benefit from how you think about CX, because over the last 30-40 minutes, what we discussed, I feel This is how CX should be thought about. One more question I cannot help but ask you, Lynn, before we close is you started working in the customer experience space when customer experience wasn't even the strategic function that it is today. And there was no literature, there were no frameworks. You were probably one of the first ones to create the literature and the framework around this. So when you look back to how it was then and how it is today, what difference do you see? Do you feel that we are better at customer experience transformation today, or we have regressed?
So there's an idea that customer experience was invented recently. It's not true. When you think about the first people on Earth who bartered, that was a customer experience. Now, the
Nice.
management of customer experience, people were already doing in the 80s and 90s, calling it customer satisfaction, customer loyalty, customer equity, those types of things. There were a lot of different phrases, customer retention. We use those different phrases in job titles and so forth. And really the genesis of it was the really strong competition that Japanese companies had here in the United States in the 1970s and 80s,
Right.
where they were taking over whole industries, consumer electronics, automotive, the steel industry, semiconductors. Almost all the jobs were being taken away because people preferred the efficiency and the user friendliness of the products that the Japanese were creating. Now, they had these advantages mostly because after the war, some American quality experts went over to Japan and helped them figure out how to do things efficiently and effectively and paying attention to customers. So when we were faced with losing jobs and losing industries, the American Congress set up in 1987 the Malcolm Baldrige National Quality Award, which is actually a framework that you can still use. So we did have a framework, the National Quality Award, Malcolm Baldrige. And we also had ISO 9000, which was emerging very strongly in the 80s and 90s. So ISO 9000 is a framework that definitely focuses on customers throughout. Amazingly, I got certified in these types of things back in 91, 92. And I was amazed how much customer focus there is in these things. So the idea at that point was customer-focused management team, customer-focused processes, customer-focused results. And those were the criteria if you wanted to get the National Quality Award. We were focusing on also using customer insights to improve products, improve services, improve our attitudes, and to win back these industries to make sure that whatever industry you're in was not going to go to a foreign competitor or whoever. And so I think in the 1990s, it's just a huge misnomer that we weren't doing customer experience work. In fact, we're doing a lot better in some ways than people are doing now, where they're relegating it to support and success and, basically consumer behavior modification. What we were looking at is how do we modify our behavior internally? What happened in the late 90s was CRM emerged. So customer relationship management was a scaling opportunity for taking your customers' interactions and, growing revenue. Essentially, these efforts in customer experience were being derailed into CRM, which also had a lot of black eyes in the late 90s, early 2000s, because people really didn't do good stakeholder analysis. So even customerthink.com used to be called crmguru.com, but because CRM had a little bit of a negative connotation in the early 2000s, they changed the name to customerthink.com.
I see. Okay, that's
so this is some really interesting things. Yeah. So in all of this, what I think is so important is to pay attention to who pays for everything. Who pays for your salaries? Who pays for your budgets? Who pays for hiring? Who pays for profit sharing? It's not other investors. If you are relying on other investors or bank loans, well, you're kind of in a Ponzi scheme, right? But investors expect that you are going to get more customer revenue month by month every year. And so they're relying on that revenue from customers. So when we think about where everything is coming from and what we need to do to run the business accordingly, it just makes sense that we have customer-focused management, customer-focused processes, customer-focused policies and results, just like the National Quality Award set out to do. That's what I'm trying to help people return to, because that's where the big money is.
Return to the basics. Can't get any better. We would have so much to talk about. Where and how the new CX professionals could reach you or have access to your thoughts and content so that they can benefit from how you have thought about this through your experience and expertise, inputs and suggestions for the new CX professionals?
Yes, I recommend 3 places. One is LinkedIn because I'm very active there. I post something most days, 1 or 2 ideas. So that's a great place to connect with me and follow me, Lynn Hunsaker, just all one word. And secondly, I'm the #1 author at customer-centric.com. And so
Yes.
there I'm publishing totally new ideas. I always research what people have already said about a topic before I start writing. And I try to think of something that adds value, a totally new idea. So I've been a #1 author for a lot of different years, since 2008. And currently I'm grateful for readers making me #1 author currently. Now, the best way that you can gain all of these things in your own customer experience practices is go to clearaction.com. Clear,
Right.
like seeing clearly and taking action in a big way, not just quick wins.
Sure.
Right? So Clear Action is the name of the company.com. And here you have mini lessons. So mini lessons are the type of things we've been discussing here, but showing you in a more structured way with visual aids and also quizzes and other resources to help you really solidify your understanding of any and every point that I've been talking about and more. So the mini lessons are anywhere between 10 minutes to 20 minutes each. 10 minutes for
Wow.
enthusiasts, 20 minutes for experts, right? And they're only, $15 to $25. So mini lessons are meant to be something that really can propel our profession because you're so accessible and so something so affordable for your entire group that everyone should be able to really jump up their skills beyond today's current thing. So there's masterminds, there's mentoring, and there's also CX ROI spreadsheets, 10 different ways so far. So that's a real
Fantastic.
great treasure trove of practical tools, and I welcome anyone to contact me for more information.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Lynn. What I'll do for all the viewers and the listeners, I will be adding all the links that Lynn mentioned right in the description of this video. So please do check those out. And Lynn, I cannot thank you enough for being a part of this show, for sharing your expertise and experience with all of us. I genuinely found this very insightful. Thank you for your time, for your patience with us as we work this recording out, and for your wonderful presence. Thank you so much.
Well, it's my pleasure. Thanks for the invitation. Really great to talk with you about these things.